Hello, Hen. Firstly, hello, Hen.
I just killed a fly.
Okay, very interesting.
Live on air. Wow.
Also, as you just heard there, welcome Lakitty as always.
Hi, I haven't killed any flies, so I'm
No.
good.
I should have said a mosquito. Sorry, mosquito. That makes it better.
And then probably someone who stomped on some flies. Fucking.
That's probably accurate, but I don't really recall any of them. Hey, everybody. Glad to see everybody in the chat.
It's great to
Indeed.
have you back, Barking. It's been a while.
Yeah.
And today, what we're going to be talking about is on Friday when we went. Actually, I think earlier on we went through some of the pictures, and we asked, "Do you guys also want for us to go through the quotes from the showrunners?" Because there were some interesting ones that people got like, well, what does this mean? What does that mean? But okay. Anyways, let's get right into it. Two unlikely heroes far away from the quiet shire they call home, the fate of Middle-earth in their hands. A perilous journey ahead. Quote, we really did feel a lot like Frodo and Sam being handed the ring. J.D Payne. And I think most of this is, the basic, they're childhood friends. Okay, now this is where it gets interesting. There were so many people who pitched for this show with resumes that on paper were more suited to an endeavor of this magnitude and mid-K.
We know at least
Hen,
one, yeah.
yeah, we can prove this, can't we?
Yeah.
And I think, as they said yesterday, a reason why we believe they got to this is because they had all 5 seasons planned and had like an idea of what they were going to do. So I think maybe that's an interesting. And someone says, is showrunner the same as director? No, a showrunner is someone who just. Ken, do you actually? You probably give a better explanation
Kind
than
of.
me.
If Nikki were here, it would be best. But because she worked on TV. The showrunner is kind of a cross between a very hands-on producer, I suppose, and a kind of screenwriter. Yeah. They write, in this case they did write, the opening pilot is all they're doing, and they kind of dictate where the story would go and how, supervise the writing of the other writers, and kind of supervise the footage that comes out of what the directors are doing to some extent.
They're
It's not
basically
yeah,
their
it's not
role is
necessarily
very
the most hands-on thing, you know.
no, not the most hands-on thing, but they do have a lot of duties that a film director has.
Yes.
Also, one thing that I find interesting is that they're on IMDb. They're normally credited as creators, though I'm not sure what's the case if the showrunners change between seasons. So are they all credited as creators or not? But I do find it really interesting that the category itself, showrunners, is not like a recognized category in terms of awards, etc. They're just usually,
Oh.
jammed together with the rest of the producers, whereas I think their role is much, much bigger than that. So I think that's still a position that's in development in terms of the recognition of the role, but effectively the showrunner or showrunners are the number one people on the production. They have the
Yeah.
final say in most things, except of course the studio itself.
Yeah, I doubt. Stories about studios butting in the way they're kind of like appealing to a certain part of us. But, I'm sure these executives pick the people whom they thought would spare them hard work. So,
Yeah,
I'm sure that
and
if everything is going well, they're plenty happy to leave everything to the showrunners rather than butting in all the time.
and just quickly jump in. We also have Strider here. Hello.
Oh,
Hi
morning.
everyone,
Oh, hi,
glad to be
Strider.
with you here. Hello, hello.
And because you have joined, I think people are talking about Likitty in the chat right now, but half of Likitty's face or forehead is covered by the Restream logo.
Oh, well,
But fear
what can
not,
you do?
because
She's shilling
I
for Restream.
look at this.
Oh, look, we're
Look at
horizontal
that.
now.
We're horizontal. Look at that.
There we
So-
are. Now we're only covered
the
by the
magic.
FOF logo, which
Mhm.
is nice.
But so it even talks about up here. They worked on Star Trek Beyond and Jungle Cruise. So they'll talk about the relatively unknown area. And Varkin, we can attest that when we were speaking to them in London, they did mention this quite a bit, and they did say, we admit that, and we think people in the room probably right now will admit that we are untested, except from like that, if you get what I mean.
Yeah. They said a
Yeah,
dark horse to Vanity Fair. Yeah.
I
Mhm.
think that everybody, I don't want to say everybody, but I think most people went in there with the idea of being critical of them just because they don't really have much credited to their name. They're not known for anything superb. But I also think that speaks volumes to the amount of effort they're putting in to get this job. Because when you don't have, a long list of credits to your name and you don't have all these amazing projects you've been on, you have to put in so much more effort and detail and energy and be more persistent than everybody else to make it to the point where like they can no longer deny you and they have to give you the job. It's not something that they were looking to give it to you, so you got it. It was they have
Yes.
to earn it because they're not, this greatly credited group of people.
Yeah, I think in this case, such a big show, everybody would have had to earn it to some extent. But yes, sure.
And just to move on now, the next bit they talk about here, staggering 462 million to create, minus a large tax rebate according to reports, and that it's going to be, and they talked about the trailer numbers. But then interesting, moving on next, they said we didn't want to do the TV version of Lord of the Rings, a story in Middle-earth that deserves its own space on the shelf alongside the novels and films. We have to ensure we were bringing something fresh to it and expanding the map. We weren't interested in a sequel or prequel or a rehash or nostalgia. It has to stand on its own 2 feet as something that's felt faithful but it's also its own thing. So mainly what I'm getting from here is these are quite bold words, strong words, and they're basically saying we want this to be their own, to be its own thing. We don't have to do this typical prequel thing. So yeah, I'd like to hear everyone's thoughts on this.
I think they're bold words, but I also think they're the only right words a showrunner can have. You don't want to, especially given that it's not in strict continuity with the Jackson film. I mean, the production is a different production. So I think if they intentionally wanted to stay as close to that production as possible, it would feel like a cop out. It would feel like a cheap imitation, in my opinion. So I think it's the only right thing that they do their own thing, and I'm glad to
Yeah.
hear they're confident. I think that some of their quotes might sound a little bit on the arrogant side, and I think we'll come to one of those a little later on. But generally, I do like confidence in the showrunners. So I think they know what they're
Mm.
doing and why they're doing it, and I think that's the right direction.
Yeah, I think it does eminent confidence, but at the same time, is it a little bit gussied up? I mean, like if you don't want to do the prequel thing or the rehash thing, you wouldn't have hobbits in it. That would seem to be a pretty prequel-y thingy. So, it's kind of the thing
That
where
is
what they say they will do and what they do aren't the same thing. But yeah, sure.
Yeah, it is true, and it's also true that they have hobbits. They've cast Morfydd Clark, which I'm sure was a smart choice, and I'm sure she'll turn out to be wonderful. But of course, she does visually resemble Kate Blanchett a
Oh,
lot.
sure. That's intentional. We
So
know that.
yeah,
Yeah.
there were absolutely intentional similarities, etc. But yeah, I still like what I'm hearing in this regard.
Me too. Yeah.
Can't say that
And
I don't.
Varkin, Stride, anything else to add on to that? Does this fill you with confidence or is this overconfidence from the showrunners?
Well, there's certainly room for this to backfire if the show ends up not being good.
Actually,
Uh,
yeah, it says it
That's
there.
a good point. That's a good point. Anything that they say that sounds nice now, if fans don't like it, they'll throw it back in their face.
Yeah, so
That's
we'll have
always
to see. We'll have to wait and see. But as Lakitia said, maybe the quotes sound a bit like arrogant. But then again, this is not the whole transcript of the interviews. So they definitely do sound confident, and it's definitely the most important thing. Like they need to be very confident in what they're doing, especially with something like this. And they, they say that they have the clear image of what they want to do, and that's good news. Let's just hope we will not retread the words in half a year and be like, well, you guys certainly jumped the gun there. So yeah, I don't think that will happen. I think this will be a good fantasy show.
Yeah. And to talk about what you said around, this can really easily backfire on them. I think the article mentions it next. Succeed in Payne McKay and their fellowship of filmmakers will set into legend the September fail in Middle-earth, or at least fans' hopes of an enthralling new entry in one of the greatest sword and sorcery stories ever told, will fall into darkness. But how, by the beard of Durin, do you balance all that while crafting a return to Middle-earth? So, Bart, can I push that onto you? By the beard of Durin.
I just want to say on the previous quote about this not being a prequel, I think some of that is, sure, it's a little bit of bravado on their own. They need to stand on their own. It's their project. This is their baby. Their success or failure going forward in the industry is probably going to hinge on this. If they bomb Lord of the Rings, it's going to be very difficult with no credits and a major bomb to their name to be able to get quality work going forward. But if they hit a home run and they knock it out of the park, then they're going to be a very, very hot commodity going forward. And I think the other thing that hadn't been brought up yet is I think part of that quote is like legal. They don't have the rights to directly hitch it to Peter Jackson's trilogies. They have to kind of keep it separate because Amazon doesn't own all the rights to like connect that for them. So they have to sort of stay away so they don't really get in any trouble there either.
Mm-hmm. That would make sense. And I think, yeah, if, like, for example, I'm sure Henry knows this more than me, but like if Warner Brothers, they see this coming out, and with Soul's aunt's company, like it's still getting quite technical around all of them. So yeah, that could be a measure where
we don't know the situation there fully though, because it's just come out that what Vanity Fair said, which is what you were saying, isn't necessarily fully based, which is just like the thing that they pointed at as being Narsil isn't actually Narsil, like that sort of thing. So we really don't know what the situation with Warner's is. We do know Warner's is partnered on the show still. We don't know what the situation, the particularities of it very well.
Mm-hmm. And even in the last line, it can be transcended again. The trick, it turns out, was not to return to Middle-earth after all, at all. At least not to the one you remember. And then that, interestingly, moves us onto the next page. I think, was it about 7 pages? Oh, we just get a massive... oh, sorry.
Yeah, the next page apparently is like, yeah, I don't know why, but okay.
Oh, please change it.
I'm trying my best. Let's check if it's that one. Okay, not that one. So we're going to.
No, that's the same page. Do Viking now. No.
No, I can't. I don't know how to choose.
Say hi, Viking.
There we go. Here we go. For those of you who don't know your orcs from your elbows, a quick history lesson. The events depicted in The Lord of the Rings are a speck of sand in the hourglass of the timeline of Middle-earth, explains Payne. Quote, Tolkien's Legendarium is this enormous tapestry that stretches 9,000 years. So that's quite interesting. I think people are starting, why have they said 9,000 years? That was
about
quite
right,
debated.
I think.
Yeah, it's... Mm-hmm.
Is it?
And then... I think 9,000 years is not
right
like
ballpark.
egregious problem. Yeah. And then it said Tolkien's Legendarium is this enormous tapestry. We said that one, and they talk about the First Age, Morgoth, interestingly. Then it talks about the Third Age. But when they speak about the Second Age, it says contains some of the greatest stories from Tolkien's mythos. Payne continues, it's the story fans have always wanted to see fleshed out, but until now has only really been told in whispers. Is that when I think, to be honest, when people have asked for a Lord of the Rings show, it has or Tolkien show, is the Second Age the number one? Strider, is it number 1 for you? Because I know you like this area.
I don't think so.
Well, Gilgalad on its own has such a potential to be a hit TV show. So yeah, actually, before that, I just want to comment on the 9,000 years. Like, if you put together second age, third age, that's and actually also the first age, I think that's around 7,000 years. So I'm not sure what's this 2,000 years. Maybe that's like
Yeah, like years of trees stuff.
general,
You can get to 9,000. I can see.
like the 3 ages plus the 2,000s for that. The world general is definitely much older than that. But to answer the second question, second age, definitely, like Battle of the Last Alliance, that entire war, seeing Arnor and Gondor founded, seeing all the drama in Numenor, definitely one of the top picks. Mine was, we had a show on this. Mine was the Civil War in Arnor and the Fall of Arnor. That would be my absolute top pick. But this is definitely, I do agree that this is one of the more popular things people would love to see. So I think they chose well.
Yeah, we were talking about this before. You're right, and I too. The very first thing I assumed we would be doing was Angmar, and we've lost Viking and Lakidia. What? Well, I'm just gonna keep.
Don't
talking.
worry, I'm doing it to make sure.
Yeah, no one can stop me.
He doesn't come on the stream again. So go on. Continue,
Where
Harry.
was I? I don't think it would have been my first pick. It is my first pick in a way for a TV show because I think it lends itself to TV more than some of Tolkien's other stuff does. I think most of the legends of the first age would lend themselves more to cinema. A lot of the more there's only so much of Tolkien that really lends itself to television, and I think, in a sense, this may be it. Yeah.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Is it
That
one of
makes-
the point that is much more meaningful to me? Is it's some of the greatest stories from Tolkien mythos that I don't think is true at all. Actually, it's nice that they're passionate about the story that they are telling, but I don't think it's, in this case, not true at all.
Well, it depends on how you count them. I mean, the story of the rings is basically a separate chapter in the Silmarillion as a whole. So, like, if they look at it like that, then yeah, I can see their point. Like, you have Quenta, Silmarillion, Akalabet, and the Lord of the Rings. If you look at Silmarillion like that as a whole book, then yeah, I can see why they would describe it like that. But I also see your point, yeah.
And the Last Alliance as well. I mean, but for sure, they're not going to be saying, yeah, we took this really obscure story that nobody really cares about and we made it into a show. Ta-da! So,
Yeah.
it's kind of pep talk.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But moving on to the next one, they talk about Empire starts saying, it's talking about how Sauron rose, how the mythical island of Numenor fell, and the forging of 19 rings. I know people debated 19, 20, but then they're misemitting the Ring of Power and the red shape Middle-earth's destiny. And then we move on to J.A. Biona. It's a very interesting time. He says, who helms the first 2 episodes, war has ended, but peace hasn't settled yet. There are characters who have an intuition that evil is not yet finished. They face a lot of denial across all these different worlds. You're seeing characters deal with the impact of war and the suspicion that there's more to come. So I think this is, of course, aimed at Galadriel, who has that intuition, but interestingly enough, they face a lot of denial, which is very interesting, and I think that's maybe linked
we
to
talked
that
about it last
coronation
time.
scene. Yeah, but Varking, initially, what do you think type of Middle-earth is this? I think J.D Payne Patrick McKay even told us about it, but going into the beginning of season 1, what's the landscape?
Well, I think things are intended to be looked upon as a much more peaceful time than we saw in the films, for instance, and it's supposed to be a wilder, kind of more fantastical version of Middle Earth, maybe a little bit more high fantasy that Hen wouldn't like. But I think that's the opening, is that people are expecting or believing that the big battles are done for now, and then you have, as you had said, Galadriel believing that there's still more to come and we shouldn't let our guard down yet. And then you have these other people not believing her, because it's hard to trust an elf, honestly. But I think like that's sort of the tone that we're setting at the start of the show here.
I
Wow.
think to some extent there would
The
be
gloves are off.
probably yeah. I think to some extent there would be like a character in almost every storyline that feels that something is amiss. But yeah, probably Galadriel is at the forefront of
Mm.
and while I don't necessarily feel the high fantasy vibe, I do think it's a very good idea conceptually to start the show in a time of obviously relative peace. I think that's very important. And even like, an unexpected journey opens in relative peace, but it opens in the geopolitical situation is totally different. Like it's like these specks of settlements separated by lots of wilderness, whereas here we have kind of an elven empire and a Numenorian human empire and suddenly a dwarven one. So it's much more. It's the golden age, so to speak. I think that's very important to emphasize in the show itself. I hope they would. I guess they would.
They would. It looks like they will.
Yeah.
I hope they don't take it too far though.
Sure.
One of the things that I remember is when I visited Weta Digital that was in November 2010, just before they started shooting The Hobbit, and I had a little chat with somebody working there, and he told me, which was then of course repeated many times in interviews, they were going for the very much the idealized, the very golden look of the Shire in particular, the whole era, but the Shire in particular to evoke that idealistic feel of the setting before hits the fan. So
Excrement. It's called excrement.
excrement. Poop. So I think that might result in a very over the top, colorful, just a little bit kitschy world. From what
Sure.
we've seen so far, I think that is the direction they're taking. For my personal taste, everything is a little bit too on the nose. I would much prefer everything to be a little bit more subtle, from the costumes to the photography, to the sets themselves, to the design. So I really hope that in the end we do find that they're not taking the whole idealized golden age of elves and men
Too far, yeah.
shtick too far. Yeah.
Yeah, and the same is also true of the peacefulness of it. If it's too peaceful, it's not very eventful. So there's also that, of course. I don't think it will be that, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. And just moving on now, we go into the next part. It talks about Galadriel. I think this starts to get into quite an interesting and maybe a bit sensitive area. But the Empire created her as a hungry warrior, unafraid to battle a snow
Sure.
beast or two and get involved with action. Quote, it was like being on a school trip. I got to do swimming, riding, climbing. She has Morphy Clark. Galadriel is legendary. Claim Blanchett as Galadriel was legendary. Tolkien himself is legendary. And then 33-year-old laughs. This version of Galadriel still has a lot to learn. I had to find that balance between someone who has got an element of the eternal but hasn't yet seen it all. Don't expect the same character that you meet later. Ghost Rider.
Sure, fine.
Initially, what
Fine.
characterization and overall feel of Galadriel do you think they are trying to express through this Galadriel at the first start of season 1?
Yeah, so it's definitely one of the points the fandom has been divided about. The Galadriel that we see at the end of the Lord of the Rings, she ended her journey. She's going to Valinor, and she's going to do whatever else are supposed to do until the end of the world. But here, I don't know. I do understand why they want to do this, because just doing the same type of the figure of wisdom that we already saw in the Lord of the Rings doesn't really make sense from just an interest. It's not going to be an interesting thing to see 5 seasons of
Yes.
that. So we gotta see her go through a journey. Oh, and
Yes.
even more importantly, in this TV show that's going to be 50 hours. Okay, in a movie, not every character has to have a story arc and character development, but she definitely has to have that here. However, the thing that's kind of slightly bothering me, not bothering, but it's not completely agreeing with what they're saying here, is that she already saw so many bad things. She went over the ice. She went throughout the whole first stage. She it was said that she spent a lot of time in Doriath, where she met Celeborn, and she learned a lot of Meliana Maya's wisdom. That's basically a quote from the Silmarillion itself. So
Mhm.
I do not see her. I would never imagine her in the Second Age as a warrior. However, I do understand why they're doing this, and I just hope that they
Yeah.
will be tactful with this, not
And-
go over the top like that sword.
I think you've made a really interesting point, because when putting into perspective, yes, she's already had most of her learning done by this point. In Second Age, there's not much growth, except of course with Celeborn, etc. But it's really interesting. But I see Varkin disagreeing, so do you want to say something?
I
I
also,
do.
yeah.
I would like to talk over Hen for a second
No, please
and-
do.
and say that it doesn't matter how old you are. You could have learned a lot during your life. You're always going to have room to grow. If people can grow as they get older, so can elves. And yeah, she might be very old from our standpoint, but it doesn't mean she doesn't forget things she learned in the past and needs reminders in the future. They don't say she's like a complete idiot or anything. It's just that she still has
Yeah.
room to grow. They all do. If they didn't, what a boring life that would be to live for thousands of years potentially, and
status,
there's
yeah.
nothing new to you. You just go through life pretty bored.
It's also, I think there's something much more meaningful. Two things. One, there are most of the audience of this is not going to know Galadriel's first age backstory. They only know that this is a younger Galadriel, so they expect a more youthful, slightly headstrong, perhaps, that sort of thing. That's
Mhm.
one. The second thing
Yeah.
is that, I'm sorry, but what people always call lore exists to serve the story. The story doesn't exist to serve the lore, and so it's fine and dandy that like they have to give us something to go through, and so they picked this, and I'm totally fine with it. And the fact that she is as old as she is, like they can play with that, you know. They'll do what they have to do to make a compelling character.
I agree. And there's also another element, which is, and maybe I'm going to get something wrong. And if I do, I'm sure that Horatius, son of Rome, is going to attack me in the comments.
Oh
But
no.
as far as I know, one of the things that Galadriel has always wanted was to rule the realm of her own, and to um, which was a motive that we get to know with her back in Valinor. So if that was one of the things why she decided to to depart from Valinor in the first place. So that's something that we haven't seen her do yet. So
Right.
she's been this prominent member of the Elven Society for a long time now. Obviously, like you guys mentioned before, she was studying under or learning under Melian. But this is the one aspect of her that the one aspect of, I don't know, life experience that she hasn't yet got. And I think that particular element brings a lot with it, and it makes people, elves in this case, mature in ways that they haven't had the opportunity to before. So I think there is a lot of room for her to grow and to learn. I don't think people necessarily expected her to be full of piss and vinegar. But I can't blame the showrunners for trying to give her perhaps a slightly more mellow, not mellow, but more dramatic character arc. So I kind of understand why they're going with it.
And moving on, further down, it starts talking about Elrond, and Peter Jackson just talking about him again is much more. I don't even know how to pronounce that word. Acerbic, with a willingness to step into the unknown. Says the man who plays him, Game of Thrones, Alan Robert Arameo. So, first of all, what does acerbic mean? If anyone wants to define that. Hello?
Hey, do you hear me?
So, yes, can everybody hear me?
I can hear you.
Good. Okay. So, what do you think of that quote, Strider? That this Elrond one, where he's saying he's much more acerbic with the willingness to step into the unknown.
Well, I guess maybe that's connected with. Again, we have to see him grow as well, right? So he's also this legendary, wise person at the end of the Third Age. But here, he is actually, yeah, indeed pretty young. He does remember the War of Wrath, as he mentions in the Lord of the Rings at the Council of Elrond. However, for an elf, he is pretty young. So seeing him, he will also be more action-oriented than what we are used to in the later time. At the later time, so yeah, I'm pretty happy with this. I'm actually very excited to see the path that he will take, especially because of that whole architect background that he was given in this show. So yeah, I'm very excited to see Elrond, who is directly participating in the events that are happening, because he was also the herald of Gilgalad. So he's going to be one of the main characters, obviously. But I mean that as well as just when it comes to moving the plot, I'm sure he will have a very active role, and it's going to be a very interesting change. And I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Acerbic, by the way, means you know the sort of things that Lakidia says to Kyle. That's
White Wolf
acerbic.
in chat says acerbic equals sharp critic. So yeah, thank you for that.
So lucky Theodor's
Sorry?
Nothing, we're just
Yeah,
teasing
nothing.
you and Kyle.
Oh, did Kyle appear in the chat or?
No. I was describing to Fellowship what acerbic means, and I was like, well, you know those comments that Lakidia makes towards Kyle. That's acerbic.
Slightly constructive criticism.
Oh,
Yeah.
slightly. Okay, slightly. I'll take that. By the way, does everything look okay? Because I can only see myself right now, and I don't like that. Can you guys see everything else normally?
Yeah,
I
can
see
everything.
everybody, and I
Yeah.
see the text and everything as well.
I want to see everybody too. Okay, never mind. I'll figure it out.
Okay, so the next part. I'm sorry, Varkin. There's nothing called dwarves so far, but it also talks about Gilgalad, king of the elves. Man, how cool is that? He is during wartime he rose to the occasion, and during peacetime he's fighting to maintain the peace. Oftentimes that means using people to his advantage, but in the way we wish that our real life politicians were. He strives to bring the best out of everyone. So we're finally seeing our Machiavellian storytelling here.
Yeah, it
do you
was
think this
also in his character description, so it's not. It's
that
not
was
a
yeah,
surprise.
so
What
Varkin,
was it
what do you
like?
think of that?
Manipulate for the greater good. It was there. Yeah.
You can go to somebody else on this. I would have spoken on Elrond just because he seems like the kind of cool guy that would interact with dwarves and maybe need our help with something.
According to the pictures, so is Gilgalad, though.
Is he, or is he looking kind of angry in his image, looking across the table from?
Nah,
the
he'd be
biggest
too
dwarf of all
scared.
time?
No, I think it's maybe that the dwarves just drank all the beer, and now Gilgalad is like, "Come on, I'm the king here. Give me some beer."
I could see that being a scene somehow.
But I have to say, actually, it was something that's very exciting for me. Okay, long-reigning warrior and politician during wartime, heroes to the occasion, and all that sounds very, very interesting. Specifically, what I want to say is, I am very curious whether we will see the dwarves of the Ered Luin, of the Blue Mountains, because they're right there at the doorstep of Lindon. And I really want to see Gilgalad interacting with them, and getting some politics there as well. So that's very exciting for me to see that.
Yeah, it would be interesting. I thought about that earlier, way earlier, like when we were still mostly speculating. I thought about that to see Gilgalad subletting, as it were, to some dwarves would be quite interesting.
Oh yes, exactly, something like that.
Yeah,
And then, but Lakita, you've said that you didn't really like the part where it said it using people to his advantage.
Yeah.
Why don't you agree about that?
Well, I mean, that's the kind of typical benevolent, slightly manipulating, I don't know, authority figure, leader that appears in every single piece of fantasy media ever. Like the most typical one is Dumbledore in Harry Potter, I would say. I actually think I would prefer Gilgalad to be simply noble without any ambition to, using people to his advantage. He can have lots of nuances, but this particular formulation I really dislike for Gilgalad. I like that he strives to bring out the best in everyone. I really like that bit, but somehow but this might be just my own personal headcanon for Gilgalad. I kind of imagine him being somebody who would be opposed to any sort of manipulation. So, and I do
Yeah.
take this as manipulation, using people to his advantage. That doesn't sound good to me.
I
Yeah,
agree that
you
that
gotta
formulation
wonder
doesn't
how
sound very
that.
happy.
Yeah, but you gotta wonder how that manifests actually in the storytelling. You
Yeah,
know, you
like
can present that in
I
a
could
thousand
say
different ways.
we could say that Gandalf is something like that because he
Oh yeah,
also
sure.
moves
Yeah.
around those gloried chess pieces,
Mhm.
and he does move them around and often it's not clear for those chess pieces what's going to happen and why that's being done to them. So
Yes.
Yeah, of course, but
how I want to see this quote, how I'm personally hoping that this quote will actually turn out to be is something like of that Gandalf type of ruler. But yeah, I do agree that
yeah,
using people to
Done.
his advantage doesn't sound specifically very
I
noble.
I hear what you're saying, and I would like to see somebody like Muriel be like that, ultimately having very good intentions and striving to do, the best thing to bring out the best in everybody,
Mhm.
but not being opposed to, just a little casual manipulation here and there. But for Gilgalad, for some reason, that doesn't sit right with me.
I do wonder,
Yeah,
he
fair enough.
says he's proven in battle, so will we like see him like early on fighting in some flashback or something? That would seem to be the thing that is insinuated here. Although some
'Cause
of
that'll be
this
a
is
good
also,
juxtaposition.
some of this is also actors talk to some extent, like there's certain ways that actors like to present their characters, you know. I think
Yeah.
that's somewhat the case here.
hmm
How cool is
And
that,
moving on, it says these Fellowship era favorites traverse Middle Earth in the Rings of Power, encountering characters and events either based on the notes in Tolkien's appendices or made up entirely. In the former camp is a band of Harfoots, ancestors to the Hobbits. They're led by an elder named Sadok, played by Lenny Henry, and feature an adventurous free spirit in the number called Nori, played by Australian newcomer Markella Kavanagh. She's very inquisitive and resolute, Kavanagh says on her character, who she hints is torn between her dedication to her family and her hunger to search the world for ways to improve the Harford's way of life. She longs for adventure, and that sometimes makes her a troublemaker, for better or worse. I think that's interesting when
Fam
we see
Bilbo.
her, yeah, see her meet Meteor Man, because that's some going out of the dark.
Well, but Bilbo wasn't really, adventurous to begin with. He was very much the opposite. That's something
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
he
he had, I think, a streak of adventurousness would be a better way to put it. But yeah,
Yeah, but a total homebody. I don't know. I gotta say, and I know this is not gonna get me any fans in the chat, but I gotta say I don't dislike this whole Harfoots thing quite as much as everyone else.
okay.
I'm not. If I could choose, I would absolutely not choose to have them in the show. Um, but I'm willing to give them a chance. They
Oh
might turn out
sure.
to be overly, like Hen likes to say, cutesy and whimsical. They might turn out to be very, very cheesy, which I really hope doesn't happen. But I'm absolutely willing to give them a chance. I haven't liked all I've seen so far of them, but I am quite intrigued by Nori's character, despite the unfortunate name. Um, and I'm kind of looking forward to seeing the world from a female hobbit perspective this time around. So,
Oh, okay.
like Priscilla TV says in the chat, hashtag give Harfoots a chance.
Oh sure. I mean, I think it's very important to, as much as we like to grumble and stuff, and voice our, I think, not unfounded concerns about it. I mean, of course, you have to give it a chance. If you like go into it thinking it's
Mhm.
gonna suck, then you're probably just gonna convince yourself into
Yes.
seeing it. I mean,
Say that for the people in the back. I'm looking right at you, Horatius.
I can't shout. No, it's shout.
But what's it called? Varking, wouldn't you be a bit annoyed because there's these little people who might be challenging your little people for who are the most favorite little
No.
peoples in the show?
No.
No, I don't get annoyed about that kind of stuff. I think that, based on what little we've seen in, our trip to London, based on what little we've seen in advertising, there's not enough to get upset about. And I know like the bigger idea is that the more time you give to Harfoots, that's less time to give to somebody who's actually an established character. And I do feel the pain of people who are maybe not going to get to see, their favorite character or their favorite race shown more. But at the end of the day, everything they've shown of the dwarves has been a hit so far. So I can't go in being really upset about anything. It feels like every time they're going to be on screen, it's going to be pretty magical. And it's weird. I thought when I saw all these new images that a lot of people were going to be even more upset at the Harfoots because they are getting a lot of attention right now. And it seems like a lot of like the casual fan on the internet, they're kind of like turning the corner on that. And I've seen a lot more positive comments and a lot more like, okay, they're starting to grow on me a little bit. And it seems like that discussion around them, there's still the people who absolutely hate.
Well, they won't be growing.
No, they might. I mean, look at Largo.
Largo,
Yeah.
the most ironic name. But Viking, there's a very major point to be made here. If we map out the different storylines by number of major characters per storyline, the dwarves are by far the smallest one. They're just 2 major characters. The hobbits have
Victory.
like 6.
So
There's some justice in the world.
let me jump in on that note. Yes. So yeah, there could be like 54 elves, but guess what? The elf storyline is going to have to split all those different ways to give everybody their fair share.
Oh,
This-
sure, that's also
This means that we're probably going to get a lot of Durin, a lot of decent.
But to be fair, a lot of what we've seen so far about the dwarves has been with the elves. We've seen them at the seat, sitting at the table in Linden. So maybe
Well,
there's
yeah.
a mix between them two.
So
I
when you
actually
put out a
think there's another
picture
reason.
of, a gentleman that's been cast that not everybody has liked the look of, but then the next picture has more elves in it. Again, boo. But then you put a dwarf at the other end of the table. Now all of a sudden the internet discussion is it's not so bad now. Look, Durin still looks awesome, and you take away some of that hate that was going to go into it originally.
That is
That's
true. And
yeah,
I
I'm not
find it
sure that's
odd?
how it works. I think they're more. I think it's more about concealing or not showing too much of the grandeur of Moria, so they don't feature it in many shots. And when they do, it's quite close up on the characters. Whereas we have seen nice glimpses of Linden, so and Tirharad certainly. I think they're keeping Moria.
You're
to
almost
their
through the
chest a little bit.
article, and there's been nothing of the dwarves in it really, outside of a mention of like Durin's beard. That is by design, because if you put dwarves in there and you talk about the dwarves, it's gonna
It's gonna suck all
overshadow
the.
everything else in there. So like this is smart
Yeah.
marketing for them.
But I have
And-
to say that I
Yay,
know I
Jews,
joke
dwarves.
about it. I joke about it a lot, and we have this little bickery going on with Varking. But I do think that both these actors are fabulous, and from what I've seen from both these characters so far, I'm intrigued. They seem like a really connected couple. I think their story is going to be really interesting, so I'm really looking forward to their story. So
And I saw in the
Interesting.
comments earlier people saying all the armors have looked like cosplay. As somebody who got to see the armors, I don't know who or how much money it would cost to do the armor that Durin had on display for us to see and potentially touch if security wasn't around. But if anybody can do that for a decent cost, hit me up with DMs. I would love to get in touch because I've never seen cosplay that good.
Very interesting. Maybe when you're at Comic-Con, that could happen. You see a lot of cosplay there.
Golden foot
knows?
boots, guys. Golden foot boots.
Wow,
Also,
Indeed. But to make sure this isn't a 3-hour stream, we're going to skip what Lenny Henry talked about Harfots, because it's just going to make us talk about Harfots again around the same ideas. Because
Boo.
it's just basically saying, yeah, there'll be boos anyways. So, okay, but then interestingly, actually, to be fair, looking at this, we have the quote. Payne says, in his letters, Tolkien talked about wanting to leave behind a mythology that left scope for other minds and hands, wielding the tools of paint, music, and drama. We were doing what Tolkien wanted. As long as we feel like every invention of ours was true to his essence, we knew we were on the right track. And I think we've talked about it in the last stream, so I don't
Yeah.
want to get into the
That is
Yeah.
granular
Yeah.
details of that letter, but I think we've all. But Barkin, I think this is your time to shine a bit
Oh,
now, because
Lord.
we're finally talking about dwarves at some point. The show takes viewers to
Finally.
the dwarven kingdom of Moria in later years, an abandoned mine. But in this second age, the thriving home of two other key characters, dwarf prince and princess during the fourth, and Giza, rulers of the subterranean realm of Khazad-dûm. Wait, it says rulers. Are they
Rulers.
implying that? Yeah, no,
I
no,
didn't even catch that
At the
before.
same
Yeah,
time, it does say
two
prince,
things.
so you know.
Yeah, yeah, but does
Yeah,
that mean
but
that means that's either that means they're both going to be on the throne and slash, or that means during the third, who is Peter Mullen, will no longer be ruling as from some point in the show, whether that's he stepped down and
At
he's
some
there
point,
being
sure.
regents. But yeah, probably most likely
Yeah.
in the first episode or two. But
I'm
yeah,
not
and I
sure,
think
but
that's
yeah.
very it is 90% in the first episode. But it's really interesting that that means they're going to be ruling for a large part of it. So yeah, it's pretty spectacular, as what Sophia Numbity says. But Varkin, I know this is your area.
is it?
What do you think of this?
And mine.
I think everything written in here strikes the right chord for me. You know, when we're talking about seeing this thriving home of Khazad-dûm instead of, you know, what it may become later down the road, like that, it's probably going to be the most impressive thing we see in the show is what Khazad-dûm should look like when it's at its peak. And
Mhm.
sure, it's interesting to say dwarf, prince, and princess, Durin and Disa, who are ruling the subterranean realm of Khazad-dûm. Sure, that means it doesn't say king yet. Maybe, you know, as we had talked to the showrunners and they told me, you know, I will appreciate their take on like the reincarnation aspect. Maybe there's something to that makes it where he's not given the throne yet. And that's why we're not given the throne, but that's why he's not titled king Durin. And that's why
Yes.
he's still prince, because maybe there's something that has to be done or a way to earn that.
Mhm.
That's different than how the other people do it.
Yeah, I think it just you said ruler because how else would you say that? Like without getting into, oh, actually, there's a father there, and they're kind of
Yeah,
like they won't. They just
it's
say
more.
rulers. Yeah.
Yeah, it's more like royalty at any rate.
Yes.
You know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Um.
like, you know, this is Fellowship of Fans, but really, like, Hen runs everything. He's the guy. Even though he's just a prince, he still runs the show. We all run everything through Hen.
Wow. Wow.
I was gonna
Shots
say,
fired.
yeah, I was gonna say Lakidia, but sure. Uh,
She rules from the shadows.
Sean McDonald in the chat says maybe Durin the Fourth is not referred to as Durin until Durin the Third dies. That's an interesting take.
It is, but
I
still,
wouldn't
he's
know.
referred to as Durin the Fourth in every single piece of media that we got. So
Because during the
Yeah.
majority of the season, that's what he will be referred to as. But maybe early on, he's just Greg.
mhm. It's an interesting
Greg.
idea, but yeah, Greg would be a fine name. Yeah. It's an interesting idea, but given how often it's been emphasized that he's Durin the Fourth, I kind of doubt they would go with
Yeah, I doubt it too. I think it's just, England like had two King Edwards in a row. So if you know how to play it,
Mhm.
you can do it
Yeah.
without it sounding terrible.
And the next part is just talking about comparing to Peter Jackson, so we'll just skip over that and that interesting line of we're not trying to compete. But then interesting, this I think was trying to finally getting into the interesting area. Case in point, that shows that people brought up and wanted us to talk about the show's action, which will find new ways to thrill, separate from the epic armies of Jackson's trilogy. The siege at Helm's Deep is so iconic and amazing that it was like, what's a different thing that we can do that still feels like Middle Earth but is unique for this story? asked Payne. The show has a lot of action in it, more so than any television or streaming show that we've seen. Every episode has set pieces, creatures, battles, and white knuckle fights to the death, adds McKay. But instead of having 10,000 orcs fighting 10,000 men, what's it like to have one orc in your face, in your kitchen? What's it like trying to kill an orc when you've never killed an orc before? It's a Strider. Initial thoughts on this, and why do you think people have been debating this and gotten a bit, you're not worried, but, a bit skeptical over this?
Well, as someone who likes to play D&D, when you're a first level character, even a rat can be a problem. So, fighting one orc versus 10 orcs when you're higher level, I can definitely see why that would be very intense, because those first levels are always super super dangerous. But jokes aside, this is interesting, and it comes to my mind the fight with Lurtz, when Aragorn fights Lurtz at the end of the Fellowship of the Ring. We didn't really see a lot of scenes like that in the movies. So I like this take, and I'm sure we will definitely have a lot of battles as the show moves on. But it's going to definitely be interesting to see. Like, for example, the scene from the trailer with the ice troll. I wonder how that's going to turn out. We haven't seen those smaller scale skirmishes for real.
Yeah.
So it's going to be very interesting, and I do like this approach. It will get boring and repetitive, and even if you look at Game of Thrones, some of the best action sequences were on a much smaller scale, like the battle where Jaime Lannister gets captured in, like, I think season 2. We don't see the battle; we just see the outcome and the interactions after that. So we don't have to see huge battles, 2 times a season. Give us one bigger skirmish or something. But yeah,
And
seeing something like this, it's going to be
Yeah,
interesting.
there has to be big battles at some point, sure.
Yeah.
Even got
But
from
I just want to
leaks that-
say that the Jaime Lannister thing that you mentioned, I think that was the very end of season 1, the Battle of Whispering Woods, I want to say. That was due to budgetary reasons, which is not something that this particular show will,
And
Oh,
completely
sure, but I don't think. But still, even in the books, I think it's not actually shown. Like, I think you see the aftermath.
Yeah, that is true. But I think that this show will absolutely go there as often
And-
as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
for
they have
you
to.
guys on the leak show,
Yeah.
then we already know that there's going to be massive. We've got that the blonde haired prince. We've got the battlers Middle Earth. We know that Elendil's take sending an armada to Middle Earth to save them. We know there's been those orcs. But we even see it in the trailer. Even though it's going to be a first stage flashback. So then people took of having 10,000 orcs for 10,000 men. People saying, okay, because Lord of the Rings movie fans and of course big fans have been accustomed to big battles. So of course, when seeing that, people would get worried or like boss out. But I think it's safe to say that at least if my word means anything, there will be still be big battles. But I think what the point here is that emphasizing on that, they want to differentiate it still in some way and have smaller
personal.
skirmishes. Yeah, personal. The orc in your kitchen thing. So
I
yeah.
think
That sounds like I hear orc in your kitchen. I think Bronwyn, but yeah. I mean, it's just a eternal phrase, but still.
Yeah.
What do you think,
I
Viking?
think that's a smart way to go in general. I think that sometimes we talk about when we're not on air a lot, like things that take you out of the show or out of the movie. And a lot of times when I watch major big battles on screen, even when I watch Lord of the Rings, there's a big battle. The main character in that particular scene is surrounded by enemies. Even though everybody knows how important that character is, nobody just turns from the guy they're fighting in front of real quick and runs in and like stabs the guy in the back. And it seems like there's way too much luck involved with getting out of these major battles alive. When you have smaller battles and more 1v1s, it gives the actors themselves, both from like the hero and the villain standpoint, more room to sort of like show off their skills. And you get to have like that more intimate battle than what a bigger battle can provide. And they filmed a lot of this during COVID. Maybe there were some reasons why they couldn't get 7,000 people together to fake
In
a
New
battle.
Zealand, you can't anyway, but yeah.
And Viking, we've both watched Vikings. I think that's in the earlier season what they did really well was having those more. They had battles and skirmishes, but more on a lower level. Also,
Yeah.
Steve, thanks for the super chat. Got to go in a bit.
Thank
a
you,
pleasure as
Steve.
usual. Play nice. I'll catch the rest of the stable. Thank you, brother. Thank you as always. Really
you.
appreciate
I
it.
wanted to also mention actually Vikings and The Last Kingdom. I think both shows had shown to the audiences how even the big scenes, even the huge like the bigger battles can be very tense when you put the characters into danger and when you know that there's like an actual danger for them that they may die. And I think both shows actually
Gladiator
did a
is
lot
like
of
that.
good things with that.
Hmm.
Gladiator is
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
Though as the time went on, for example, the Vikings, of course, weren't able to maintain that pace,
Hmm.
especially in the last
Yeah.
two seasons.
Yeah. You have
Mhm.
to grow bigger.
Nikita,
That's
were you
another
going
thing.
to
You have to
mention
start
something?
smaller.
No, I just wanted to say thanks to Steve as well.
Okay.
wow.
Okay.
But yeah, you have
Okay.
to start smaller to get big. Otherwise, it just flatlines. So yeah, that's good.
Mhm.
That's not a bad approach. And we knew that would be the approach that they would take because we knew that there was a mandate of you have to have a big set piece pretty much each
Mm.
episode. And we
Mhm.
also those set pieces that we do know about, flashbacks to the first age notwithstanding, have been like a troll fight and that sort of thing. So they're
But
more contained.
are the big set pieces necessarily battles? I don't.
Yeah, set piece is not necessarily a battle, but yeah, but like action or
Mm.
spectacle of some kind, like a big crowd
Yeah.
That
scene,
quote
Okay.
itself,
Yeah.
that quote itself
chase,
about this
full
is
chase.
more action than we've seen on screen. This comes from McPayne, right? So let's be honest, they've been focusing on this show and they've been doing a lot of writing for things that didn't
Wow.
make it to air. Maybe they just haven't seen a lot of TV, to be honest. Maybe they're that far behind on things that they don't know and they haven't seen all the biggest battles.
Yeah. Fair
I
point.
beg to differ because I agree there isn't a lot of action in a lot of premium TV. There's maybe a lot of spectacle, but not necessarily action, fights, chases. There's less of that. There's a lot of talking and a lot of thriller aspect to a lot of high-end TV. A lot of
Mhm.
spectacle sometimes. Oh, look, very impressive wide shot, but not necessarily a great deal of action. So to say that this has unusually large amounts of action could be a very astute statement. Um,
Yeah, and I think one thing that's been reiterated again
and it's
and
good
again,
too. It's good. I like
again
action.
and again, is it isn't just other iterations of Middle Earth that the Rings of Power seek to separate itself from. Its attempts to surpass all TV that's gone before it. Quote, "The Rings of Power is not television," says Biona, as serious as Aragorn charging the Black Gate. It's a new form of creating it. And this is a guy who's worked on major blockbusters like Jurassic Park with a new one, which is not that good. It's come out, but that's massive budget, and he's worked on big stuff. So
No,
that
he
is.
worked on the previous one, which is
Oh
also
yeah,
not good at all.
I know. I'm saying
Yeah.
the most recent one's come out, but it's not been that good. But the last one, even though some people still didn't like him, it was alright.
Oh,
And yeah,
yeah,
as
it's
people
not
saying
good,
on
but yeah.
chat, yeah, Last Kingdom and Vikings were really good. But I think this stage continues on to the next quotes,
Yeah.
next
Can I
page
say
as well.
if there was something that earned the arrogance that Lakitia and Strider were talking about earlier, I
Mhm.
think it's this. I mean, this is really like
Yeah,
okay, fine,
this
and
is
you
true.
form whatever you want, J.A.
Mhm.
Bayona. Like,
Yeah, it's true, and it's like what are we expected to expect here? I mean, people will be for sure expecting something completely different, and are inevitably going to be disappointed because no matter how bombastic this is, it's still going to be a TV show. So,
yeah, I mean, they're not gonna teleport a raccoon into your TV set, Like it's not.
or a fox. It would be really dope if they did that to a fox. The thinking
Yeah.
fox right into your living room. So I would
Maybe
love
we'll
to see
see
that.
the ancestor of the thinking fox.
Cat owners
Wow,
wouldn't be pleased of having a fox teleporting into their living rooms.
I wouldn't be either. My dog would go berserk.
Indeed. What's it called?
And there's more of that malarkey, yeah.
So we have it
Mhm.
here. Series, not a TV series. This is where people have started to pull more stuff out. It's a 50-hour movie. That's really how we've approached the Rings of Power, says McKay, explaining how unlikely practically all other TV shows which survived from season 1 based on ratings, Amazon have already commissioned 5 seasons, which the duo have already mapped out in full. We even know what our final shot of the last episode is going to be. The rights Amazon bought were for a 50-hour show. They knew from the beginning that was the size of the canvas. This was a big story with a clear beginning, middle, and end. There are things in the first season that don't pan out. Is it the first season that don't pay off until season 5?
That's
I think
good.
we spoke about that a lot before as well.
That's good.
Um,
As much as it's a
Ron-
boast, it's a good ideal to aim
Yeah.
for.
Ron Ames, he says this Ron Ames is also a person who's really involved in this show as well. With J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay, he says the attention to detail lavished on this vision of Middle Earth certainly sounds like it surpasses most TV shows. Quote: "We dived into caves and stood on glaciers to make rings of power." He says, where's his next? So we wanted every race and every part of Earth to be unique and different from the other, so we had to think through all the cultural references of each. I love the Dwarven Kingdom, for example. How could they build a society beneath the earth? How would you grow their food? How would you exchange air? How would you channel water? Where would light trickle in? Varkin, can you answer any of those questions, maybe, as a dwarf expert?
Come back to me. I'm handling something in chat.
Okay, can I comment on that?
Sure, go for it.
I think this is absolutely wonderful. This is personally one of the things that I want most from any production, to pay attention to this sort of detail. I think this is what makes the world building feel alive. Of course, you need to have a fantastic script and fantastic direction and everything, but I think from the perspective of a fan, I absolutely love this. And I think you can really tell when these sort of things are really thought out behind the scenes. I think the rule of cool often makes for very unimmersive settings. So I really like that, they're actually thinking about the logistics behind this stuff. So
I agree that it sounds very intriguing to see. That's some of the things that we take for granted, especially when you look at Casa Doom in the movies. Like, I don't think a lot of us were thinking, okay, where did they get their food? And as Akita said, this can really bring in the immersiveness of that particular kingdom. And I know there's fan theories on the internet. For example, why dwarves in usual have beards, and then people create all these sorts of interesting theories that it's like a biological necessity because the beards filter the bad air in the mine shafts and so on and so on. And if they go that path, they get it's something on Tumblr or whatever. The point is, there is a lot of room to play with these things, and I do hope that they will take time to not just make it look cool and be like, this is the way we think it should be, but it's maybe not really thought out. So hopefully they will, for real, think about these interesting things.
I would hazard against reading it too literally, like when he says, how would you grow your food? That doesn't necessarily mean that we'll have scenes around the dwarven food industry.
We don't
of course.
But the fact that
it could be in the background or something like that.
Yes,
it
I
can
think
still
it's
be
just
amazing.
the sort of thing that people like think about, a little bit like how in the Argonath scene, if you look in the background, you can see a quarry, which would be where they mined the stones that they use to erect the statue above ground level. So that sort of thing, but you don't have to actually see, oh look, dwarven food supply lines and kitchens and stuff.
Totally.
Well, you can speak for yourself there, because I'm very interested to know.
Oh, I am too. I'm just not saying we'll necessarily see it.
Who are they trading with? What are they trading for this stuff? Mithril's worth more than some bread. All that stuff is pretty fascinating. I'm not going to get upset for the show giving me tons of information about my favorite fantasy race of all time. I look forward to it, and I hope it takes screen time away from y'all's favorite races.
Hey, if I don't get to see Glorfindel because I have to see dwarves growing food, I'm going to be very pissed off. Just a heads up.
I will say specifically something like growing food would be difficult to work into the plot too. So it's like it would be difficult. It would be the sort of thing that would feel like an aside if you were trying to work it into the story. So
You know
I
that
don't
quote
know.
from Morfydd Clark where she talked about how she thought she had a great imagination until she walked on
Mhm.
set and then was like blown away and realized her imagination for things was much smaller than she thought. That's all you folks right now, okay? When you see it, you're gonna love it. Get off of it.
Yeah, and
Get
it
off of
um
it.
and the sets constructed across season one's 2 issue were enormous as the show sought to lean into practical effects rather than computer wizardry. The sensation of being able to walk around the fully realized locations was surreal, says Payne. Stepping into the, interestingly, elvish harbour, Linden, for the first time and meeting all these characters in full costume again and again, you had this feeling of being transported. And I think, Barkham, this is the quote here, was not aware of how
My fault.
limited my imagination is until I stepped onto set. It was like, oh my god, I have the imagination of a paper bag compared to this.
Can I
And
can I chime into this one? First of all, talking about how immersive the sets were, etc. At this point, I think it's a little bit redundant to include this in this sort of articles and interviews because this is what every single production says. In
Yes.
every single interview, all the actors from The Wheel of Time, The Witcher, just whichever sci-fi fantasy show, they will all say the same thing. Yes, we get it. The sets were immersive. I'm sorry if I'm being impatient here, but I would rather learn about other stuff because I'm sure the sets were immersive. And the other thing, stepping into the Elvish Harbor Linden for the first time, what do they mean by this? Is this
you know what?
my huge fear coming to fruition that Linden is gonna be a
Town.
city?
Yeah.
What's happening to
To
Mythland?
quickly jump into there, J.D. Payne doesn't say those 3 words, and I think
Yeah,
this is just
there.
Yeah,
Empire trying to
absolutely
explain
true.
That's Empire
what it
putting
is.
words.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But I think
like
Yeah.
there's
trying
a
to.
reason why I think they would double check this sort of thing.
Yeah, but at the
So
same time, they want a word for
Yeah,
audiences to understand, so they'll just say, "Oh, Elvish Harbor,"
yeah.
yeah,
like,
the Elvish realm.
If
It would be so
if
yeah.
easy. I'm
if
sorry, I'm
Payne
really
like said
cranky
that,
No, I
about
get,
it,
I
but
get, I get your point though,
I'm
totally.
really afraid because
Uh,
that's how referred to Lyndon and Aragion in the Vanity Fair articles too, in the way
as
that
cities, yeah.
really made it sound as though there were cities. They didn't refer to Numenor that way. So
They don't refer to Khazad Dûm that way.
Khazad-dûm is
yeah,
different because
they
it's
just
all
don't talk
You're
about
dang
underground
right it
Numenor.
city,
is.
so it really is a city. So a big one,
yeah.
but
But for
But
people
I
who
get
are,
her point totally, and unfortunately, it's the sort of thing that you do see in film and TV, which is that it's very difficult to give a sense of a country or a realm in film or TV, and mostly you boil them down to a major settlement, and that's kind of your kingdom for the sake of the show.
Well, to
And
be
that's certainly the
fair,
case
Minas
with.
Tirith is pretty much like that, and
Yeah,
uh,
absolutely.
like
The
we don't see
Return of the
anything. We see
King.
Osgiliath, and that's it.
Yeah, we
Yep.
see little glimpses of other stuff, but really, Gondor, from the standpoint of the
Yeah,
audience, is Minas Tirith. And the
Mm.
same is true
in the
of. Yeah,
movies.
sure,
but
What?
to
sure.
flip it on its head, it says the Elvish Harbour Linden, but everything we've seen from Linden so far is forested, and
Yeah,
Mhm.
but right
does not
next
look
to
like
the
a
sea,
harbour
so
at
you'd
all.
imagine it's
Yeah.
nearby.
It looked
Yeah,
like it was like in the middle of a forest.
Yeah,
on a
it is.
So
mountain near the
Yeah.
sea.
I'm sorry for making such a big deal out of this, but this is something that really irked me. And
No, I get
I
it.
would find it really weird if, after all the attention they seem to be paying to this sort of world building details, they would, in the end, go and do something like this. So I hope
I
that's not
agree.
what they
The
do.
Shire is like that too. The Shire, from the standpoint of an audience member, is really just Hobbiton, really, and a lot of like countryside. And
Yes.
yeah, that's very common, and I
Mhm.
get your point completely. I think it's a very valid concern in a way. I would like
but
to
to move on,
feel that these are countries.
Mhm.
but to
Before we
move on
move
to
on, I just want to like a tiny comment. If you guys remember the map that was used as the promo content, like like 2 years
Yes.
ago, 3 years ago, whatever. Um, I will at this point take that map as the actual map of the world because I'm hoping it is of the world that we will actually see in the show. And there, Austin
I hope
Athiel was
so, yes.
there, and then there was a larger title that said Eregion. So
Yeah.
I will take that as a good sign so far that it will not be as we do fear. But
Mhm.
absolutely understandable, and all the comments for Minas Tirith and for Hobbiton
Mhm.
being equal to the Shire in the movies, those absolutely stand. And yeah, well, let's just hope that's not the case.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
can
there
continue
are
this
precedents.
conversation for another
Rohan is
time.
not
We
like
can.
that. Yeah.
Is what the biggest budget ever for a single of TV buys you then? Well, last paid. Without confirming or denying the reported numbers, we think it's important to keep the budget in context. Really, this season is an 8-hour movie. This is the length of 3 Marvel films, done on the schedule of 2 for the budget of 1. Look at it in the context of what's actually being produced, and you could
Mhm.
say that it's a bargain, which got people really interestingly discussing this. So thoughts?
Anybody wants to take this one away?
I mean, it's less. They have a point. Like a really, really big event movie does cost more than this. It does. So but you can, like different people can get different results out of the same budget. Ridley Scott is great in that, where you're like, how did you make that much money look this big on screen? So yeah, it's the sort of thing that you really can only judge on the screen.
It's
And there's also
actually
that the budget in the first season, like it's also the question of the distribution of the budget, because the budget in the first season can be used to, or was used to build the sets that will then be reused and reused in the next seasons.
That's
So
very true. Yes, I think that's very true. Although you have to wonder how much changing countries will have set them back in this
also
regard.
true,
But
yeah.
yeah. Other than that, I think that's very true. Yes, and they said that. One of the executives pointed that out earlier in an interview. That it's
it's one
putting
of
the
the few
framework.
quotes that we've gotten from anything that has really given me pause, because when you think about the crunch that has to get done to get these things done, and you put into perspective that this is the equivalent of multiple Marvel films done on a smaller budget in a smaller amount of time, most people would be in agreement that they would like you to take as much time as possible to get something done to ensure that it's good. And I mean, that's a lot of work that goes into these, and now it's sort of, crunched down into a smaller scope. That does worry me just a little bit. But in the grand scheme of things, being realistic, you could have very minimal budget and produce something great or something poor. You can have unlimited budget and still make the worst movie of all time. Budget helps to have more of it, to have that wiggle room and that leeway, but ultimately, to like a casual fan, to a regular person, I don't care how much money they spent on the show. It needs to be good. It doesn't matter how
Yeah.
much
Yeah,
they invested.
yeah, that's basically it. Yeah.
And then let me get the next one up, the final page, which is actually quite a long page, to be fair. This one? No, that one. I believe it is this one. It should be up now.
Yeah, there it
Let me
is.
zoom in on it
Perfect.
a bit more.
Ooh, artillery.
This show will compete this autumn with another prequel series inspired by Middle-earth, but now a competitor to its fancy crowned Game of Thrones spin-off House of the Dragon. In the 8 years Tolkien creation has lain
There,
dormant since The Hobbit, The Battle of the Five Armies, George R. R. Martin's Tales of Westeros have sent the TV fantasy genre careening into darker, bloodier territory. Did anything about Payne and McKay's approach to the Rings of Power change because of that altered landscape?
7
Quote,
years.
you can psych yourself into keeping up with the Joneses, but one of the mantras on this was go back to the source material. What would Tolkien do? Replies McKay. Some of these other competing properties, actually, we've already read this one. We've
All
plenty
right.
of times before. Then moving on to the next one, we're dealing with one of the greatest villains that's ever been created in Sauron. And one of the central figures in the story is the character of Celebrimbor, Charles Edwards. He's manipulated into helping create the Rings of Power. We're excited to be bringing him. He's very mysterious. Any final comments on that?
I'm just
What?
wondering about Mysterious.
Yeah, same.
That's all I have.
Same. I'm kind of that's a kind of curious thing to say. So
Yeah.
yeah, especially given that, why would he be mysterious? The other characters that he's supposedly interacting
Yeah,
with,
they know him well.
they know him well. They've been,
Mhm.
together for millennia.
It feels like. It feels like with all these elven characters, firstly with Elrond, who's going to be this politician, then you have Gilgalad, who's going to be, manipulated people, and now you've got this mysterious Celebrimbor. It really does seem like they're going for this heightened area with the elves.
Yeah, they're changing stuff.
Um,
I'm fine. I don't know what it means really. I think it's easy to read too much into it. I'm just curious.
Yeah, you're right.
And then, Ken, I know you won't like this bit.
No, I like
Lord
it.
of the Rings doesn't skirt over the darkness. It takes you to the depths of Cthulhu and the lair of Shelob, where friends are betraying each other and characters are being dragged into Mordor. It's a harrowing experience you go through, but in the end, there's always a star in the sky that says "keep going," which is exactly what I said yesterday, and you got angry over.
It's a little
I
bit
just find that's
different, but
a
yeah.
bit serious.
No, I get it.
No,
It's
but
got-
it's the same thing. You go to the lowest, then there's always something which makes you come back up, and that's what he's going through there. But yeah, do you want to comment on that? Should we move on?
No, I think we should move on.
Yeah. Then Lenny Henry feels show's impact could be profound. Growing up in the West Midlands, a stone's throw from where Tolkien grew up, he loved fantasy but felt alienated by the exclusion of people of colour. The Rings of Power is more diverse, cast offers a welcome, course correct for the genre. He says, if you can't see it, you can't be it. Finally, in the show, kids are going to see people of colour taking up space in the centre of a fantasy series. We're very visible in this world, and that's very excited. Morfydd Clark also has high aspirations. She read The Hobbit in year 6. It was the first adult book I read. Being Welsh, I was brought up on myths and magic, so it spoke to me, she says. And then she hopes a 12-year-old feels the way I did reading The Hobbit for the first time, inspired and excited. And then, yeah, I think it's just mostly,
there is something here, which is she a little bit like the showrunners, like aims it at 12-year-olds. Okay. It's very important, I think, not to make too much of it. It's just kind of a proverb, but yeah, here.
But yeah, I don't know. I do think that this show will be
Folk
more in the because the Lord of the Rings itself can be watched by 12-year-olds.
It can, but I think very like borderline. Like it's it's pushing.
I watched it
It's
when I was
pushing
8.
it. Yeah, but
I
it's
don't
pushing
think
at the
so.
boundaries at PG-13. It's quite intense. So
Not.
I don't think so. But I mean, the themes are very
No.
life affirming, like they say they want to make this show as well. And I think the violence also is not too graphic. So I think this show might be quite similar to that
Yeah.
in a way. Mojo Dojo says important words from Lenny Henry. I agree with that.
I think it's a much smaller statement. It's not the big statement that he thinks it is,
No.
but okay.
I think
Like, it's
ultimately the
okay,
statement is
it's
just that they
fine.
hope people watch the show and navigate their way to the books and the rest
Yes.
of everything else involving Middle
that's
Earth and
Morphids,
Tolkien.
yes.
That's all it is.
That's Morphids, yeah.
And just finally, I'll get this. I've chosen this thing to get up while we now wrap up. Let's get up some of my favorite images so far. But overall, let's start with who's at the top. Who is at the top? Actually, we start with Lakitia and we go down. Also in chat, tell us your overall opinions. Do you feel confident hearing this Empire stuff? Do you feel less confident? Actually, Lakitia's at the bottom. Okay, we'll start off with Varking. Overall, has this made you feel more confident or less confident?
This particular image,
Oh,
No,
I
no,
think he
the
means,
article in
yeah.
general.
in general, I think I've always been either cautiously optimistic, or after we had gone to London, I definitely felt more optimistic. I'm not ready to dive in and say this is going to be great or amazing, but I think these images for most people, not maybe the people on Discord and Reddit, but most people feel a lot better after these images have come out.
Yeah.
And for what's my favorite image of this batch that we saw,
Arondir.
there's a little shot where Durin and Dees are in it, looking super happy and lovey together. Nothing big.
I would have bet my
Yeah, of
life
course,
you would say
nothing big, they're
Gilgalad.
dwarves.
I'm so surprised at the moment.
Hey, to his credit though, that Gilgalad picture, I have nothing negative to say. Unfortunately, I think they knocked it out of the park with him. He looks great.
Nice. Okay, so we got a dwarven stamp of approval on these photos, which is very very comforting
Yeah.
for me personally.
Mhm.
I have to say, for
And
me,
we've seen people
this
in
Dear
chat
Harald
saying
photo
more
is
confident.
very very good. Like this of the latest set of photos, this one and the dinner,
Mhm.
those two are probably my.
Indeed.
I mean, as everybody's probably
Yeah,
favorites. Absolutely amazing.
I personally filed them differently because I
Yeah.
think comparing a landscape
Mhm.
shot like this to what are mostly shots of people, really much closer framed, you know, it's a little bit like comparing apples and oranges. So this is like in a category of its own with the Tyrion shot and those kinds of shots, and then there are the shots of the characters. But this is very, very.
Indeed.
Yeah, fair enough.
And then, Ken, your overall thoughts from the comments?
I like them. They vary. In some of them, I do see the kind of spirit that people have been attesting from the London event. It's difficult to judge these things by text, but some of it really radiates confidence, excitement, the desire to do something kind of new and brilliant. You know, like I do get some of that from it. It's nice.
Strider, you?
Well, I do feel more hopeful. Um, we mentioned how important it is to be confident in what you're doing, and the showrunners obviously do not lack confidence, which is good. But I just hope this show will be good and that it will not get less good as it moves on. It can even start mildly, moderately well, as long
And
as
get
it keeps
better.
going forward. I'll be happy with that. As long as it builds and improves, that's going to be a win for me.
That's
But
very
yeah,
likely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
yeah, I think
Well,
so because like every they have to see the reaction of the fans, get some feedback, and then in the future seasons they can improve.
yeah, you need to
Certainly,
find your
I'm
footing.
hoping that
Yeah.
we will not see the same thing that happened to the Game of Thrones, which declined towards the end with the last two,
Yeah, that's
some would say
different,
three,
I
four
think.
seasons.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
different.
But it is definitely very different circumstances, broadly speaking. So overall, I'm definitely more confident. In
Mhm.
fact, if I could say that, I think Warking at some point in the past said this very well. This promises to be a very good fantasy show. So for the casual fans of fantasy series, this for me is probably going to be really really good for people like that. And then there's the question of whether it's going to be a really good Tolkien. I think definitely it definitely has potential, but I will still remain cautiously optimistic because I just do not want to be heartbroken if it
Indeed.
doesn't end up being like that.
And finally, Lakitian, your thoughts?
Um, well, first of all, I think I'm at the point where I kind of don't want to listen to the narrative that Amazon is putting out at this point, but I want to start seeing things and making up my own mind. Like, I really need to see the trailer as soon as possible. Seeing the images is, of course, wonderful. But even the images itself, they don't look exactly like the cinematography will look in the show itself necessarily.
Not even
That's
with a
something that
trailer,
was
though. Yeah.
yeah, that's something that I was very well aware of with the Wheel of Time as well. From what we've seen so far, I'm not the biggest fan. Everything looks too colorful for me. I would very much appreciate the more like grounded quality that the Lord of the Rings film possessed. Um, but I do appreciate the enthusiasm. Like I've said many times during the stream today, I really appreciate the attention to detail. It's absolutely clear that the showrunners have the enthusiasm necessary to pull this off. Whether they have other qualities remains to be seen, but I have a lot of faith in the showrunners itself. But to me, from what we've seen and heard so far, everything seems just a little too um, I don't know, a bit superficial from what it looks like to what we've heard so far. I don't know. That's my take so far.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And just in case you missed it, I spent a few hours and we've released some new phone backgrounds for you. I think Varking, you already maybe if you can maybe show up on screen your new background. Is that possible?
You're not going to be able to see it greatly, but I am already
Ah.
using the DISA Endurance. I have notifications on there, so it's kind of blocking them. But man, are they looking
Okay, yeah,
lovingly
makes
into each
sense.
other's eyes right now.
Yeah, indeed, can choose from. My phone is currently this L1 one.
That's nice.
I don't
That's
think
very
anyone else
nice.
here has changed it, but if you guys want to, then change it. Feel free, and then us on Twitter if you for which one you change. I've already seen a few already, which is very nice.
Oh, can I
So,
just
make sure to have. Interestingly enough,
get a tiny comment there? Just I want to say
Mhm.
also, while you were scrolling, I remembered
I like
also
this.
the shot of
I
the
like
troll. I like it way more now than than what we saw in the trailer. I think that was a significant upgrade for me personally. It looks way like I like it now. Not
Yeah.
I'm not super crazy, but
Yeah.
I want to see it in action. But I like it now. While the first encounter with it in the teaser, I really did not like that. So
Mm.
I just want to mention that.
It will still look different in motion. It
Indeed,
will have
indeed.
more motion blur than I think it does in that still.
Um,
But yeah, I like this one by the way.
and
This one, that's great.
yeah, it seemed like that people like to probably put this as their background the most because
That's
it did get the
lovely.
most likes outside the main one. So yeah, indeed. But I think just to wrap up, we'll get As Everybody Loves. We'll get a lot of people saying I agree with Lakiti in chat, which is a fair take.
As they should.
And yeah,
I mean, that's just
and also
facts.
someone saying go for it, Stride as well. So yeah, more support than interesting opinions. But I think it's time to wrap up. It's nearly 8 o'clock in the UK and probably hitting that everywhere in the world. Thank everyone as usual in chat for joining us. It's been so much fun. Thank you, Hen.
Oh, yeah, thanks. I love this. Thank you.
Thank you, Strider.
Thank you everyone. Thank you for everyone who tuned in with us and who will be watching this a bit later. And hey, Kyle just joined the stream. So
Morning,
like
Kyle.
the chat. So
No, Varlock.
hello, sir.
No, Strider. Varlock says I love Strider's analysis
Yes.
too. We need more Strider. Very interesting.
Yes,
Thank
I
you,
agree with
thank
that.
you very much.
I absolutely
need-
agree with that.
We need more Strider and more Lamb.
And also, thank you, Lakitia, for coming
Hey,
on.
thanks to everybody. It's been lovely, and the chat was absolutely magnificent today, right up until the moment that Kyle joined just now. So it's time to wrap up. Let's just go
See,
home.
a Serbic.
Yeah,
Chat
and
was
of course,
amazing.
after a while, thank you, Varkin, for coming back as well. Hopefully, we'll see more of you soon.
Yeah, now that I'm back home, I'll be more than happy to hop on. Just a couple things, because I promised like 3 people earlier I'd comment about the dislike number, but also I saw towards the end of chat, somebody said it feels like the articles don't really have any information in them and that they lack context. They're just hype articles. I think that's by design. I think that everything that we've seen has been from the first or second episode, no further than the third, in my opinion. And I think that they're trying to do their best to keep the plot points themselves as secret for as long as possible. And about the dislike number, the 1.6 million, and where does that come from? It's just an extension that people download. And then the people who have downloaded it, when you dislike it, the guy who made it runs a cool little algorithm, and it takes that data and it guesses how many dislikes are on a video. So unlike everybody else who just took the 1.6 million and ran with it, I asked the actual guy who made the extension, how many dislikes can you see? And he said, and I quote, 55,000. So from 55,000 to 1.6 million, you do the math on how that's guessing. Don't use that going forward, people. It's not accurate. Do better. I love you guys. Steve, thank you for the donation earlier. And just in general, we have a very good 10 to 12 people who are very active in our chat, who are every time I tune in, not just positive, but they're having fun with us. They're having fun with other people in the chat, and they make the community what it is. We appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in every single episode. If you haven't, please join us on Discord as well.
Yep.
Hop on Twitter. We're here for you guys. Anytime you want to talk Tolkien, hit us up. We want to do it too. And thank you guys for having me on.
I don't think I can say anything more. I think Varkin summed up perfectly, except from also extending my thank yous. And I think until next time, which hopefully is soon.